Once I decided to caricature Will Ferrell from his classic Christmas movie Elf, I had to find the right photo reference with the expression and pose that best captured his character's pathological levels of Christmas spirit. And this still frame seemed to do that with the huge grin and wide open eyes. Buddy the Elf's whole personality seemed to be represented by this single shot. Even though it's a little fuzzy and low resolution, it's a great image to work from. The caricature starts off as a fairly standard thumbnail concept sketch to figure out the direction I want the exaggeration to go. I like the concept immediately and transition it into a rough sketch by continuing to draw on top of it. Since it's just a rough sketch, I'm not worried yet about any unintentional distortions or about making sure all the features are aligned. For now, my main goal is just to refine the likeness, and I like how it's coming so far. The likeness is working and the expression is good, although it doesn't seem to quite capture the energy of his personality. He appears a little too relaxed, despite the excited expression on his face.
I just like to smile. Smiling's my favorite.
I think it's his body language. We can't see much of the body, just the neck and shoulders. But as I begin the next step of the abstraction, I make a choice to alter his pose slightly so that his chin is pushed down into his neck to make him look more tense, like he's trying to contain his energy. So he'll have more folds of flesh on the front of his neck, and the angle of the torso will change slightly, as if he's leaning back, getting ready to explode. So I'm not only exaggerating his likeness, but also his expression and pose. Now, I'm tracing over the abstraction lines to create my final line drawing. I want this line drawing to be simple and clean, because it's intended to be my guide for my final painting. All of my decisions about the contours and wrinkles are clearly indicated here so that there won't be any question about the facial construction later on. I even do some basic crosshatch shading here to help inform where to add my darker values later on. However, when I took a break, went bike riding, and thought about this painting, I had an epiphany. It came to me in a flash. I realized that the best way to paint this particular piece would be to do it in the style of J.C. Leyendecker, the Golden Age illustrator who did lots of Saturday Evening Post covers. He did a lot of Christmas illustrations over the years, and he was one of the main inspirations and mentors to Norman Rockwell. His style is extremely unique and identifiable. If I were to describe it, I would call it a type of illustration that's rendered more graphically than realistically. Although the finished effect appears to be highly realistic, when you look more closely at his work, every shape, every shadow pattern has a specific design to it. He idealizes all of his forms through simplification and abstraction. Every stroke seems carefully planned, and anything that's not necessary is eliminated. And that's not even getting into the brilliance of his composition or storytelling skills. Trying to draw and paint in the style of another artist is pretty challenging. It's like trying to write in someone else's handwriting. So I'll consider this more of an homage to the master, rather than a style imitation.
You sit on a throne of lies.
So I'm redrawing my final sketch. Only this time, I'm designing my pencil strokes more carefully. I try to simplify and idealize the contours and the anatomy. Straights become straighter, and curves become more graceful and flowing. I also take more care in mapping out the edges of the shadows, so that when I paint, it'll be more like a paint-by-numbers exercise. If the shadows and other color shapes are not clear in the reference photo, it's my job to redesign them in a more specific way in my line drawing, and that calls for some artistic license. If a shadow shape is nebulous or can be improved, I'll take it upon myself to make it better, based on my knowledge of anatomy and design. I first cover my canvas with a middle gray value to knock out the white of the canvas. Starting on a middle gray background helps me judge my skin tones and other colors more accurately. I next create some swatches of color that I sampled from a few different Leyendecker paintings to help start me off on the right track. It's like picking from his own color palette. When doing a study of an artist's work, I always try to find out their favorite color palette. Now, sampling colors from the finished painting is not the same thing as starting with the same palette of raw colors, but it's the next best thing. I just sample a few key colors for the skin, hair, and clothing, making sure to get not only the halftones, but also the shadow colors.
Buddy the Elf, what's your favorite color?
Now, I begin the painting by working on a layer underneath the line drawing. In studying Leyendecker's work, I think my best chance to replicate his look is to first do a layer of smoothly blended colors before adding the hard-edged shapes and color tiles. In oil painting, this would be similar to the underpainting phase, where Leyendecker would use thin down washes of color before applying the thick opaque tiles of color that are his trademark. And now, I start to add definitive shadow shapes to the face. I try my best to stay within the lines I established in my drawing and not overblend. But as I said before, it's really difficult to paint in another artist's style because we are all subject to our own personal experience and training. Once I start getting some momentum, I end up making painting decisions like Court Jones rather than J.C. Leyendecker. So I find myself fighting my own natural instincts throughout the whole process in order to achieve the look that I'm after. But the challenge of it is what's so great about it. This exercise is compelling me to analyze the reference and think about my procedure in ways I normally wouldn't while painting. To get that cleanly designed, idealized visual style, I'm more conscious about each single stroke I lay down, and end up painting more efficiently than I normally would. When I'm painting freely on my own, I tend to poke around the canvas, just doing what feels right in the moment. And there's nothing wrong with that. But I often overwork paintings or spend precious time fixing badly designed or messy shapes that I painted in the early stages.
I'm a cotton-headed ninny-muggins.
By keeping within the borders established in the line drawing, I end up saving myself a lot of hassle, even if it does go against my typical working methods. So the lessons I learned during this exercise are lessons that may end up sticking with me and influencing my own procedures in my personal work. That's what's valuable about studying other artists and doing copies or homages like this. You'll end up taking from them what works and hopefully raise the level of your own skills. And now, let's enjoy some memorable words of wisdom and thoughts from Buddy the Elf.
Best way to spread Christmas cheer is singing loud for all to hear. We elves try to stick to the 4 main food groups: candy, candy canes, candy corns, and syrup.
Why the long face, partner?
It seems I'm not an elf.
Of course you're not. You're 6'3" and had a beard since you were 15.
Does someone need a hug? You have such a pretty face, you should be on a Christmas card.
Now that the painting is almost finished, I decide to frame it in a way reminiscent of the old Saturday Evening Post covers, with a circular border. There's a bit of Photoshop trickiness here, which I won't go into because it's a little technical and not really that important. The main thing I worry about here is making sure the figure pops off the background and has a clearly defined silhouette. So I choose an off-white color with some of the background gray popping through between the strokes, much the way Leyendecker would do in his own work. An area of the painting that I haven't mentioned yet is his hair. As part of my task in replicating Leyendecker's look, I had to totally redesign Will Ferrell's hair. His curly blonde hair needed to become more sculpted looking and solid. The mess of curls have been redrawn as individual and interlocking ribbons, and I had to redo those curly locks a few times before they felt right. So, in the last few moments of this painting, I clean up here and there. If an area feels too indistinct or messy, I either add a carefully designed hard stroke or blend the messy spot away. This was a pretty hard exercise for me because of all the redesigning of the forms I had to do. As I said earlier, it's not normally something I do when painting caricatures. I usually stick really closely to the shapes I see in the photo reference. But I think I learned a bit about the value of breaking away from the reference to design shapes in a more intentional way. So I want to thank you all for watching and hope you enjoyed the process.
You did it! Congratulations!
So, you might have noticed Stan is already giving away his Santa painting to raise money for the Young Arts Foundation. To help raise even more funds, I'll be giving away 5 signed prints of my Buddy the Elf caricature.
Yay!
To have a shot at winning, just go to proko.com/12days for more info on the fundraiser and to find a link to the GoFundMe page. Thanks in advance for all of your donations, and happy holidays.